Welcome to ABA Inside Track's Winter 2023 Book Club. Welcome. We are here to discuss a book, our seasonal book clubs. And this is our winter book club where we talk about an ABA related book in detail. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me are my fabulous book club buddies or co-hosts, whichever you like.
Hi, Rob. It's Jackie.
Hello, it's Alan.
And Diana is here. She just got back from an errand, though, so she's putting something away. I think she'll be here in a moment. But the regular book club crew is here, and we decided for the winter book club that we wanted to snuggle up with some cozy books about parenting, and so we put out a poll on the Patreon website, and the winner was Between Now and Dreams, Responsible and Responsive Parenting and Autism by Dr. Shala Alai-Rosales and Peggy Heinkel-Wolfe. This is a 2021 book, and we had first heard about it when we had Dr. Alai-Rosales on the show to talk about joy and preventative care, and she'd mentioned it was, it was coming out, I think, at the time, or just been released. And so we put this on the list with, I think we had an ACT book on early childhood parenting was another choice. And I cannot remember the third one. And I didn't look it up before we got here.
Joy of Parenting, because I bought it thinking it was that.
No, that was the ACT one. There was one other one too, though. And I don't remember what it was. Joy of Parenting. And then there was one other one that I could look it up real quick. But let's not belabor the point because they didn't win. Nobody wanted to hear us talk about them. They wanted to hear us talk about Between Now and Dreams. And so that's what we're doing today. We'll be discussing Between Now and Dreams. So let's do a quick author review, and then we'll get into kind of our initial thoughts of the book, and then we'll get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty of the discussion. So again, Shala Alai-Rosales, we've had her on the show before. She works as associate professor in the Department of Behavior Analysis at the University of North Texas. She's been big name in the field, lots of publications. But again, you might remember her from our episode on joy and sort of using what we know about preventative care in the prevention of the development of problem behavior on that episode. And we are very excited to be able to chat about her book. And her co-author, Peggy Heinkel-Wolfe, is a writer and journalist who has been wrote a book originally on her first book was a memoir about the first 4 years of her son Sam's life. Sam is autistic, and that book was called See Sam Run. And so since then, she's been doing lots of writing and journalism. She posts a lot of that on her blog, which I have the address because I have some questions from the blog, which Peggy let me know were there for the book. I think it's like peggyhinkelwolfe.com, I believe is the post. We'll have a link in the show notes. And basically, the creation of this book came from the fact that Peggy and Shala have been friends for many, many years. They met not due to Shala doing consulting for the family. They sort of just had parallel tracks where they just knew each other from the fact that Peggy was receiving lots of different services for Sam. And Shala also lived in Texas, providing lots of services to other autistic students and children. And they sort of ran, I think, in the same circles and became good friends over the years. They've done a lot of co-talks together, like the parent-to-parent conference in Texas. And just sort of at a sort of turning point in both of their lives, kind of professionally and personally, they were just at a point where they said, we need to write some of what we've learned and what we know down into a book for parents. It seems to be there's a demand for it. And they had some time, as many of us did, to sort of sit and think in 2019, 2020. And we're able to craft this really great parenting book, or my opinion, great parenting book. And now we have it here for us to discuss. So that's a little background.
But it's like brand new.
It's brand new.
It just came out.
It's a 2021 book, it says, or published. I'd only seen it referenced by Shala, and then I saw it in a talk at the Stone Soup Conference. It was mentioned as a good book in a talk on trauma and trauma-informed care. Although this isn't necessarily a trauma survival book, anything like that. But it was just sort of mentioned as a good resource in terms of collaboration and building rapport, which I think it does very well. So that's a little bit of the dry background. We also, for folks who are listening to this, if you haven't already, I don't know when I'm going to have posted, but I had a chance to talk with Peggy and Shala just a few days before this recording for a bonus episode that either is about to come out or has come out at the time you're getting this. So I got some of the nitty gritty scoop, but I won't share all that right now. You should listen to that bonus episode.
Interview. We don't know where it is.
You don't know where it's on my computer. I know that much. It's in our Dropbox folder. But let's get into some initial thoughts when you heard this was the book, when you started reading the book, and then kind of just your general vibe about reading the book.
I'll go first.
Then you should go first.
Great. One thing, I was surprised that it wasn't more of like an instruction manual, right? That you usually get. So if that's what you're looking for, like do this when this happens. It is not that. So at all. And they do say that at one point in the beginning of the book, like if you're looking for us to tell you what to do, don't look any further because we're not going to, which I liked, right? Because usually parenting books are telling you what you want to do. I found this book full of really inspirational quotes, little lines that help, I think help in my own parenting journey as well. So I found the book really inspirational. I cried a few times, full disclosure. It may have been where I am in my life, but I just found how they talked about the different, I'm not going to spoil it, but the different pieces that they talk about in the book was, I think, really nice to kind of change the framework that we typically think about when we're thinking about parenting books. And talked about it more as like a journey to self-discovery as your family. Like, how can you find joy and compassion, and where can you find those moments of happiness? And it might be different for your family than it is for other families, but that doesn't mean it's not there. So I really liked that. I thought it was nice. It would be nice for like first year ABA students to read, I think too, because it kind of runs down what we'd hope our science or our field does. Like, I hope this is what we are trying to teach our graduate students, right? To be compassionate, to listen to everyone. It didn't give you like a lot of like terminology per se, but it did describe certain basic tenets of our field in a really easy to understand way. So I thought that was a nice point of the book. Yeah, so I think overall, like, I was trying to, the whole time I was reading the book, I was like saying the title and trying to apply the title to the book, like Between Now and Dreams, and then the book. And I think it is supposed to be more of like a pick-me-up book in a way, and a helpful reframe. So I know there's some chapters in here that I might go back to if I'm, struggling in a specific parenting part of my life, because there is like words of hope and words of like, right, like you can do this. It may seem hard right now. And I think that's what a lot of, I think, manuals are missing.
Jake, I don't want to go into my thoughts quite yet, but I'm a little surprised you think this would be a good book for first year ABA students, because while it's not a book for clinicians, it's a book for parents who may be clinicians or may not be. Who knows? What you have lots of jobs when you're a parent, right? But I felt like this might be a better book to give to like your graduates. It's like, great job, you're graduating. You think you're so smart and you know everything. Take a look at this book, and I want you to be thinking about how you know a lot of things and how much more there is to know that isn't related to just doing the job of behavior analysis. And Al, I'm seeing you nodding your head. I'm not sure if that's to agree or disagree with me.
No, I agree. It would also be good there too. I think it could be applicable across the board, right? I was hoping that we were setting that foundation, so by the time they graduate, you don't need to give them the book, because that's how they're incorporating responsiveness into their practice. Right. So that's what I was thinking. But obviously, if you didn't do that, you might want to give them the book. Yeah.
I think more like a sense of, are they at a point in their lives when they could hear these lessons? I think this feels like a mileage may vary kind of a question of, like, I know for me, it was like, I just need to learn these facts. I got to pass a test. Whereas I don't know if I would have been open to many of the lessons of this book, in my early 20s. I didn't have kids yet. I was just like, I got to learn this stuff, so I'm scientifically prepared. So maybe that's personal.
One, I would just disagree that I would say that it would be better to start off with compassionate viewpoints before we learn the theory, because we should have a scientific methodology within a compassionate framework, not treat compassion as now you've got your skills and here's a book about, what it's like, what it's like to read. No, we should start off with these perspectives, which we've sort of talked about with other books that we've done, that they can help form a perspective that we continue to grow. And I think that since so many of us, especially people who are younger and first starting in their journey in ABA, are already working with families, probably RBTs and things like that. And it's because they may not have the full experience with these. I mean, I don't have children and I don't ever plan to have children. So, that doesn't mean I can't be receptive to the book, which I know you weren't saying, but I'm just putting it out there that, no, it would be good for early people in our field to have an eye-opening experience with this book, which it might be for a lot of them.
I will say that in my experience, those of us who came through graduate programs. Oh, I'm Diana, by the way. Hi.
We said you'd be here. You just
I'm here. Those of us who went through graduate school as long ago as we did may feel as though this is something that would be tacked on at the end of those types of graduate studies. And I think a lot of us from kind of our generation have a lot of unlearning, or had a lot of unlearning to do with respect to how we might apply our science. I find that students who are coming into the program today are very ready, willing, and able to take in this type of compassionate approach from the beginning. And they already are coming with a lot of that framework established. So good on them.
Okay, so don't give them this book when they start, because they're already too compassionate and caring. You got to harden their hearts a little bit more, right? Then let them get back into it. Got to have that balance.
I think it would be great for beginning graduate students. You might not need to read the whole book. You might be able to sort of take a selection of chapters.
All right.
Yeah, I was just going to tack on, I did kind of wish there was more terminology and a little more, or at least more direct references than they make to some how-tos for because I feel like this is a book that if you had a family that wanted this kind of information, like a parent perspective on ABA that was not as what's found online, which sometimes can be, a little suspect or a little too rah and whitewashed. This had a pretty balanced look. They didn't, I think in the intro, they talk about that a lot of the people that were early advocates of ABA knew that things like in Lovas there were some problems, but that it was still worth pursuing because it was an intervention packet that had some results that hadn't been seen before. And so they sort of take that view that there's ambiguity to our field that needs to be addressed, but that it's a worthwhile field for those of us in it, and that we really are a caring, compassionate bunch.
Alan, what was your overall kind of feel at the end of reading this book? Like positive, neutral, negative? What kind of where were you on it?
I mean, overall positive. I just sort of reminded me of the nurture effect, in that I felt like it was a good overarching perspective, left me wanting some more and some more technical details, but I have that information, even something drawing from curriculum that exists, like the Ruby curriculum or something like that I've had training on. I feel like, I could get there, but I would just worry about parents starting in the field that had more questions. It'd be nice if it steered them somewhere a little bit more directly. But, that's not what the others were trying to do. So,
yeah. Dan, how about you? What were your overall impressions of the book?
I liked this book.
But don't take my word for it.
No, I thought this was a great book. Like we've just said, I think it would be a great book for anyone coming into the field. You don't need to be a parent to appreciate the points that are made here. And although it is a fairly casual read, right? There's a lot of like personal perspective and anecdotes that are built into it. And it's meant to be read, I think, by anyone, right? So although the tone of it is very casual, as a reader and as someone who's been in this field for a long time, I can tell the wisdom that comes to this book from years of practice, years of personal experience, and the sentences that are in here are very carefully crafted such that they address an issue the first way you think about it, the second way you think about it, and the third way that you might think about it if you are unfamiliar with our field or you have questions or concerns about our field. And I really appreciated how carefully constructed the narrative was that they put together.
Yeah. I think for me, in some ways, there were components of the book that I think clicked for me like right off the bat. Like like you were saying, Dana, I loved the writing style. I sort of really grew to appreciate how it wasn't a how-to book. I think some of where I was sort of pausing on like, do I really like this book or I just think it's okay, was somewhat just how I was coming to the book, that knowing I'm coming to this book as a clinician who wants to read this book for our book club, and then to decide whether it's a book I will recommend to parents that I work with, which to some extent I think
a robot.
Yeah, that's usually how I talk. Very popular. And I think that colored what parts of the book I really found myself gravitating towards. So for example, the book, the structure of the book is sort of three major parts going over sort of the three essences of parenting, which are learning, connecting, and loving. And I feel like learning made perfect sense because that was probably the most technical section in the book. And then by the time I got to loving, I was sort of getting to the like, all right, what am I going to say about loving? I've already taken a lot of notes for the first section. Like, will this be as good to talk about on the podcast? So I really wasn't appreciating it. And I think it was only when I started rereading my notes before the bonus episode recording and then before today. So, even this morning before the recording, did some of those parts really kind of snap into focus for me in terms of not worrying as much that I wasn't necessarily the audience for this book and really just focusing on what the authors were saying and how that could be important for parents. So in that regard, I think I definitely am, increasingly appreciative of this book. And like Jackie, like you were saying, there are some sections I would like to come back to maybe a year or so from now and sort of see, did I change my opinion on some of these sections? Like, do they mean more? Is there a different context I can add to them? Which is always very exciting about a book. When you usually read a book, you're like, I've learned everything I need to know. I'm going to put this book over there. Like Nudge, that was fun. Don't need to read that book anymore. That's fine. It's over. We did it. Would be, kind of another example of kind of the opposite end of things. This definitely is a book that I think clinicians can, whether wearing their parenting hat or whether wearing just their clinician hat, I think can definitely read and think about. It's definitely a good exercise. We do a lot of those kinds of episodes where there's sort of exercises in as a clinician, here are some things and perspectives that you need to keep in mind, even if they're not yours and they're not readily in front of you. So I always appreciate that as a point of view because it's something I want to make sure I'm always appreciating as a point of view when I'm working with families. And I also, do think that this is very much a behavior analytic book in that if you come to this saying, I'm a parent of an autistic child, I don't think ABA is right for me. I don't know what your thoughts will be on reading this book because it is very clearly written from her perspective that you are going to work with a lot of professionals, one of whom is going to be a behavior analyst. And we want that to be a good experience because that is an important experience. That scouting is one of the terms they use in the book, sort of the idea of someone who's helping your child find their path. Like behavior analyst could be a really important scout, not the only scout necessarily, maybe not even the most important scout in your family's life, but it's something you should have. They should be a part of the team. So I could potentially see some parents saying, I hate ABA, and deciding they don't like this book. But, maybe not. I mean, I think it depends on which section they're focusing on. Like if someone gave them the loving section of the book, they could probably get through that and be like, this is great. I love this author. I want to read the rest of this book. And then maybe they'd be mad if they go back and read the learning section of the book where there's a lot of talk about behavior analysis. So in that regard, mileage could vary for some parents. But I think, families that are, starting this journey of parenting and or they're working with a pretty multidisciplinary team, including the behavior analyst, and they're not they don't have perspectives one way or the other. I think we'll find a lot that they can really take to heart in this book and, really make them feel very empowered, but also help them to understand some of their other feelings they might have as parents. So some of those negative feelings in a way that I think doesn't make them need to feel guilty for having those feelings, but helps them to understand what those feelings might be telling them to do in focusing on being, the best parent that they can be. So 2 thumbs up. So 8 thumbs up for Between Now and Dreams.
One thing I liked too is how they use the terminology "our child," right? Because as a team, if you're reading it as a parent, you should be part of the team. If you're reading it as a clinician, you're part of the team, and they're your child as a team. So I like when they said, when we're looking at our child's progress. I just really liked that, and it really resonated with me.
That's nice.
Yeah.
It didn't use the term kiddo.
Right. I hate that.
I appreciate that.
I was thinking that combining this with like the Crucial Conversations book could really help give you, especially newer, younger clinicians, a nice perspective on like some specific information to help disarm some, like a volatile information, or like if you do have a parent who's curious but also defensive, could help launch some conversations, give you some terms and ideas for, starting off on those same values, which we talked about. So, I like we've said about many of these books, it's good. It's even better if you have some other material to go with it, which, that's probably true of all the books we'll read as clinicians. So
someday, Alan, I swear, we're going to find a book that is just the perfect book. It's like, that's it. Just read the book and you're good. Like, you're good forever. We're going to find it. I know we will. We got so many more book clubs. We'll get there. I swear.
One thing I was thinking about as I was reading it is I might have been a tiny bit disappointed as a parent if I was reading this for answers, right? Because there really wasn't any, and I was actually kind of looking for some too.
Well, Jackie, maybe it had all the answers. Whoa, think about that.
Yeah, so I mean, there was, right? You need to learn how to love. You need to shift your framework. You need to work as a collaborative team, right? Yeah, that's all there. But like how to do that wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if I'm like, for my like, and I can't really compare, but like if there's something like that's obnoxious happening in my life, it's very hard to switch that to be like, I should be more loving toward this, right? Like how to do that would have been helpful, right? Like parents, you should take a deep breath. You should like utilize some ACT resources. I don't know, right? Like providing a little more boundaries on like how to do that, right? Because they're like, like letting your kid be themselves, even if it's not great for you. Like that part for me, I would have been looking for like, okay, what are the steps I should be doing?
That is a good point, Jackie. And it did sort of kind of going back to kind of our original conversation, like who gets this book? Like who do you give this book to? It's the first year student, the first year parent, the expert, that kind of like, medium tier clinician, or the parent who's been doing it for a little bit of time, but maybe doesn't have their mind set up, or they're looking for new perspectives. Because there are definitely sections of this book that I would read them and say, if I were a brand new parent, I don't know what I would do with this. But if I were a parent who'd sort of been living with, parenting my child for a little bit of time, this would be such a fresh perspective that maybe just having it would give me what I needed. Because I don't need the how-to. I just need someone to say, did you ever think about it like this? And like, oh, wow, boom, that, blows my mind. Whereas the same with sort of the, for giving this to the clinician, like if you give it to a clinician who has just been thinking about the recipe of procedure. They do a lot of good food metaphors in this book, which I like a lot. But the idea of the recipe, there's a whole section in the learning chapter, or the learning part, on the idea of like, you can have a great evidence-based procedure that you can follow, but much like a chef with a recipe, if all you do is follow exactly what's in front of you in the recipe without thinking about the context, without thinking about some of the extra pieces, you need to be involved, who's going to eat this dish, right? You're not making you'll make something that is fine. Maybe it'll actually be bad, but it won't be anything very exciting. It won't really, change anyone's life. Whereas when you take what and add the context, add the relationship, add the individualization, then you're going to create something so much bigger than that original procedure or recipe. It's more delicious that way, which again, if I gave that to a first year student, I feel like they'd freak out. They'd be like, well, I don't even know how to do the recipe. Like, I can't even read the recipe. Like, how am I supposed to do all these other things? Like, could that be overwhelming? Whereas if you gave it to someone who was like, all right, I think I'm ready for this, journey. I know the facts of my job. Perhaps they're in a better place to sort of understand that next level of thinking. But I totally understand your point too, of like, oh, these are things that as a first year clinician, as a first year parent, you should be thinking about as early as possible. You shouldn't be I'm just going to read a bunch of checklists and that's how I'll be a good parent. And then someday I'll come back and think about the context of my parenting and whether I'm connecting with my child. But first I have to teach toilet training following the to-do list. And then I'll learn to love my child, right? You want to do that from day one. So I did find that to be a weird kind of paradox in some ways. Like, this book was too advanced for some folks, but also you need it right off the bat. So I wasn't quite sure if maybe that was just my reading of it or sort of like my own thinking about it in terms of my own context.
I would just say that, like with so many things, if you're starting in a new field, you're flooded with more information than you can handle, whether you're a parent or a practitioner, but especially thinking about parents. Now you can go from like diagnostic session evaluation to starting ABA in like 4 or 5 months. So having a book that at least gives you the right terms to ask questions about might be beneficial, even if it is overwhelming. And remembering that if I were to recommend that to a parent, like, there's a lot in here, some technical stuff. If you can't absorb it all, that's fine. Highlight what you have questions about. We can talk about it. That gives you a great stepping stone for like parent goals, parent conversations, things like that. So again, context, as you say, is key, but I think more information is probably better than too little and accidentally being patronizing or leaving out details.
Well, like for our students, we, in the very first class, have part of one of those classes where we talk about the matching law, but we know that they're not ready to fully understand the matching law, right? But we still say, there's this thing, the matching law, and I'm going to show you what the equation looks like. Here it is, and this is what it means, right? But I don't expect them to take all of that in the first go around, but they've now heard about it, seen it, so that the next time when we talk about it in detail, it's already, the seed has been planted there, and they're a lot more ready to comprehend it at that deeper level. So it's the same idea here. You get it all up front. Some pieces of it you're going to take away the first time, or the first pass through as far as your current experiences, and then later on you may come back and take a whole different level of meaning from some of this material.
Then you just blew my mind, because I just realized, I don't know if I just realized this or I'm just re-realizing this, that the way I read and consume most things is I have to read this once and then I'm done and I will put it away and never look at it again. And you make a great point that perhaps it's good to come back to things sometimes.
Yeah.
And even doing this podcast as long as we have, sometimes we'll get like an article and I'm like, I think I read this article. And I'll still just read the article again. Like, it's the first time I read this article and I must read this article again. And I'm just like, I don't put it together. Like, you're adding a lot of context to this from the second time. It's like, nope, I just read it. Now I'll take notes on it again. There'll be new notes.
I don't know. It's not like you're a black and white thinker or anything.
No. You know me. I love living in the gray, man.
All right. So some of the other things that I wanted to say about this book, generally speaking, is there's a lot of stuff in here that if you are like maybe a seasoned behavior analyst, or you are already coming from a very compassionate approach to your practice, then you might say, well, yeah, of course, those are the things that we do. Or yeah, of course, those are the ways that we should do things.
This hypothetical person's so full of himself.
But it's also important in our field that someone actually collects all of that information and writes it down, right? Because we can't just sit here and say, like, of course we do all that. Of course we're super compassionate. Of course we would never do X, Y, or Z, if there isn't a place where that is actually demonstrated in writing by professionals and experts in a way that's consumable to the public. So this book does a nice job of doing that. Mm-hmm. But I also think that there are, and while this book is meant for parents, there is also a lot in here for up and coming behavior analysts who maybe haven't had that background And it is, even though we're saying the book doesn't like tell you what to do, I think there is kind of a hidden prescriptive component for future professionals or early professionals here. So on the one hand, the book's kind of saying like, look, behavior analysis is able to do all of these things and they're going to do it in this compassionate way. But there's still like the missing piece that not every behavior analyst is ready and prepared to deliver care at this really expert level that's described, compassionate level that's described here in this book. And the book is trying to like tell parents that yes, they're going to get this, but it's also like trying to teach early professionals how to do it all at once, which is kind of a tough row to hoe. Do you guys agree or disagree?
Spot on.
Yeah. I definitely agree.
I agree.
Sorry,
too.
that's
Sorry.
not genuine. I do. I definitely agree.
I guess I think I accidentally did my dissemination station. But
Well, that's it, everybody. Book
what I want to
club's over.
say, so I said it.
We made it, what, like 30 minutes? Nice job, Diana. Really ruined it for everyone else.
I shut everybody up.
All right. Do we have any more sort of like grand themes of the book that we wanted to kind of discuss before we sort of break down into the different sections of the book?
Break into groups.
Break into group. We're going to do breakout rooms. No, we won't record those. All right. So the Peggy had sent me a link to the Between Now and Dreams website, which very excitingly had book club questions, which I emailed back. Thank you for sending these to me after I was already ready to do this book club, or I would have just stolen these questions and not bothered to write and reflect on my own, which as much as I make fun of how I read things in a very black and white manner, is one of the ways I'm able to really reflect on a lot of the content that we review and a lot of the research that we review. But I thought some of these questions were really spot on. I thought they would add to our discussion. So if everyone's okay, I think I'm going to pick one or two per section, so we have that to reflect upon in addition to our own thoughts. Does that sound okay?
Sounds great.
Pop quiz, suckers. And one of the questions, so it's sort of broken down into the four main sections of the book. So we've got our introduction, then we've got our kind of three cuspal behaviors. We have learning, we have learning, communication, and loving, or connecting and love or loving. So these are for the introduction, because this is almost the end of our introduction section. And it has to do with the title. What are your thoughts about Between Now and Dreams as a title? And do you have any thoughts as to why the authors chose the title in this combination? Because I know for me, when I first read it, it had this kind of hippy-dippy quality that I don't know if I'm getting soft in my old age, but I tend to like more and more. Whereas I know 10 years ago, I'd have said, I'm not reading this book. This is a book that is too hippy-dippy for me, and I'm a scientist. No, thank you. Dreams, bah.
I would think it's more serving as a metaphor. That's what I would say, right? Between now, where I am as a parent, and dreams, where I dream I should be as a parent, right? So I've included more love, more learning, more care. So that I think that's why they labeled it Between Now and Dreams. It's where I am now versus where I want to be and where I dream to be as the best parent.
One, I think it also addresses that the stigma of an autism diagnosis, and for a lot of parents, especially if their relationship with their child isn't where they thought it might be, can feel like a lot of what one wants for one's children is now cut off and not a possibility. But their point in the book is to say that now it may feel that way, but still have your dreams and your hopes and your desires for your children. And they're just steps to take to get there. Don't stop setting a high bar and wanting the best for your child. It just might look a little different. And here's some context for what that journey might look like.
I like both of ours. We put both of ours together, Alan.
Mm-hmm.
We've written their introduction, their pre-introduction.
Mm-hmm.
For the second edition of the book?
Yeah. Written by
Yes.
Jackie and Alan.
Mhm.
Actually, Alan and Jackie, because yours comes first, Alan, and then mine would be second.
Donna, do you have any thoughts on the title? I think Alan certainly. I think you both had good statements, but I think Alan, you really I think captured that idea of the dream as being something that, a lot of parents might be thinking is, oh, it's a negative now. My dreams are shattered, and how no, like reclaiming it, like yeah, you can have new dreams. It's now, and then you've got what's coming up. Gets me jazzed for the future.
I interpret it mostly the way that Alan did, but separate from this book title specifically, I think we do have a lot of work to do in our society with respect to what we envision as a perfect life for our children and what the expectations are on whether they can or cannot have a good life. So we never talk about the possibilities that children may be born with any type of disability. And that's a very real situation that happens every day. But those lives should not be valued any less or thought that they aren't worthy. And I think that there's a lot of ableism built into how we talk about children and our hopes for their future.
All right. Well, there's our introduction talk. And now let's move into the rest of the book. Now, with some books, we certainly do like chapter by chapter review and we skim over some chapters. That would be really, really hard with this book. And I very quickly, while reading it, was like, we're not doing chapter by chapter because there really are four major parts of the book that go over sort of the cuspal parenting behaviors. So we've got, loving, learning, and connecting. And then within each of those, there are tons of, I guess they might be broken. I don't think they'd be called chapters, but they're sort of just these like headings and then sort of a theme that's discussed in that heading that has to do with the grander theme of the section of the book. So I don't think it would make sense for us to sort of go into each section like, all right, now we're going to talk about the section titled in the beginning, or let's talk about, here's one from change is intentional, because some of these are like 4 pages long. Some of them are much longer than that. But I think it's probably best for us to just say, let's pick a section. We'll talk about that section, our thoughts on that section, the key takeaway points from those sections, and then we'll move on to the next section, and so on and so forth until we've done the sections. Which certainly, though, if anyone has like a subheading area that they were like, I love this one, that's the one that we can dive into it a little bit more specifically. So let's start by talking about part 1, which I think as behavior analysts, as clinicians, probably is the most comfortable area for us, the power of learning, because it has the most terms discussed, the most history of behavior analysis, the most discussion of working with clinicians. Well, maybe not the most of working with clinicians, but the idea of behavior analytic clinicians that you're working with. So this is probably the us section of the book, more so than the other two in many ways.
Most about science.
Yes, it's got the most science in it. So in terms of the power of learning, in some ways it won't be as exciting too, because they're not going to use terms that like parents won't understand these terms, or clinicians won't understand how complex our terms are, because the parents definitely wouldn't be able to understand those terms. But for me, I really loved about this section how much work there was done to sort of discuss the idea of evidence-based treatment as a component of good treatment, and a lot of sections on like, how, almost like, I think the closest to a how-to would be like how to not pick a behavior analyst in your life. Some sections in terms of this is what you're looking for them to not be doing. So, you don't want them to be working without some sort of a mentor. You want them to always be thinking about the environment first, not just I have to make the treatment fit for this family. You want to make sure they're assessing your child to see where they are. You want to make sure that they are responding to your child and not just to arbitrary cues. You want to make sure that they're changing programs based on the child's successes or difficulties, or your successes as a parent or difficulties. They seem to have a connection to other people in the field. Like they're not just, I don't do that ABA. I do my own special ABA that no one else knows about, and I don't talk about it with others. Like that's a red flag. And who thinks of ABA as a science rather than just like, I do these 5 things, because therapy is an interactive process. So again, that I took a lot of those from the section on evidence-based treatment, was just sort of the title of it. But I really appreciated that as kind of this is important for parents, but wink, wink, behavior analysts, clinicians, this is important for you to remember as well if you may have forgotten that. But I think that was probably my biggest pro area of this chapter. How about other folks?
These first, I think it's probably the first 4 sections of this section chapter. The big pieces are chapters, the little ones are sections. Is that what we're going with? Great. So I think probably about the first 4 sections of these, every
Parts.
section, I was like, oh, this is the one that I want my students to read. And then I get to the next one, like, oh, no, this is actually the one I want my students to read. And I think I did that for the first 4 of these.
Sorry, students, you're getting a lot of homework.
I know. And there was a lot of great, I would say, summarization of the important points in our field from the perspective of being a science of learning, as well as conceptualization of what and how our field should be when we are interacting with autistic clients. So the whole first 4 chunks here, I thought were just spot on.
Mm-hmm.
What I found is that the last page of each of these parts, I was like, yes. Like the last 2 pages, they always said something that I was like, absolutely. I see this is a different way to think about things. So here's like an example on page 14, like right at the top. I highlighted it. It's like, in other words, autism is not the enemy. Right? Like that thing. Some families, particularly families with young children, new to the diagnosis, may be confused by this statement and feel isolated. But remember, the essence of parenting and living involves learning, connecting, and loving. Like, I love that. When I read that part, I was like, yes, right? That's going to be hard to hear sometimes. And I think it's just like, it changes the way you should be thinking about your family and about your child and about, just how you're bringing about things. So like each last page, I was like, oh my goodness, how do they just sum that up so nicely? But I also like that they brought about the idea that we aren't a perfect field, right? That they did discuss that there are some issues with our field and there are some behavior analysts out there that may not be as compassionate as one might want them to be, right? And so I think that's important that they put it out there. They're like, find someone that is going to be good for you. Like, and then that moves again to like the collaboration piece, right? But like, I just liked that was there. Like, we're a science, yes, but we need to find someone that's going to work with us, not against us.
Mm-hmm. They really hit some of those sort of the march of science being both a blessing and a curse themes really early in the kind of, really, I mean, usually most parenting books don't talk about eugenics and, the Third Reich that early in the book, but it came up in that section, just sort of talking about how so much of what we learn is based on a lot of sad historical facts. And while we should be appreciative of those sacrifices, we also need to recognize that they occurred and that, every time we push forward in science, there's always the chance that we're either leaving someone behind or using what we learned to sort of step upon other more disenfranchised people. And then as we learn more, it may lead us to make decisions that aren't the best decisions, but we don't know that until we've engaged in those decisions. So there's that kind of back and forth sort of complexity. And, I think that's...
Like, science is not sterile.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, and just the section Science for Sale, I really liked the idea that, our foundation, us now, we want to alleviate suffering. We want to improve quality of life. But as a field, we also have to take accountability that some people who have spent a lot of money getting our interventions haven't been helped. And some of those people were even traumatized by the experience. And that while you as an individual want to be loving, caring, and reduce suffering, it's really important to understand and take responsibility for, to some degree, the fact that our field is not perfect and has been harmful,
Mhm.
and to try to reduce that harm going forward. And, I think that's because it is a newer book, and that's the number one criticism of ABA as a field, is that it has led to suffering that was not really listened to before, I would say even 10 years ago. Like
Yeah.
the visibility of ABA criticism has really stepped up. And I think that's a great thing. I think that it's very important that we be held accountable for the things that we did wrong. And you can't just wash your hands and be like, well, I didn't do those things. That's not how this works.
Right.
That's not how this works. Like, our science did harm, so we need to examine everything we've learned and how we apply it now to make sure that we aren't repeating harm. So, and then also love the whole, add to that context the fact that it's private healthcare and that there's venture capitalism is now involved,
Mhm.
which, growth is not progress, always progress. I like that phrase too.
Mhm. So, Alan, I also like this section of the book, but one of the things, and I'd love to hear your take on it. It did feel a little, for kind of, the first third of a parenting book, it did feel like, would parents be the best target for this message? It almost felt like, while we would want them to know these things and think about this concept, the idea of services being important for their child, but also kind of becoming a commodity in some ways. And while that's not necessarily 100% bad, it can be pretty terrible when we make treatment a commodity, and when we think of treatment as like, well, your child's autistic, so we're going to give them this treatment to fix all their autistic problems. So I mean, that part felt very geared towards parents, but a lot of, I think, the other discussions almost felt like it was more towards clinicians who might be reading this book, or individuals who are sort of in charge of some of these companies. So I don't know. I mean, was I just, could I have just been projecting, or did you get that similar sense of like, this is for parents, or like parents need to know this stuff right now?
No, because I would say that it makes the assumption that parents have already encountered ABA skeptical information, and that if we want to convince people that we are changing, you don't ignore that skepticism. You bring it up from the beginning.
Mhm.
And also it signals to clinicians, like, if you want to function and thrive and be an effective, ethical person, you need to keep this central to how you present yourself and how you act, especially owners of companies, that the ethics of our field is shadiest when it comes to profit. So don't do evil.
Yeah. I think they really wanted to just take a very open and honest approach. So any points that they anticipated could be brought up by parents as criticism, they addressed them early on in the book, which I think is a good approach. But Alan already said that better than I did. So
That's why he's here. Just kidding.
No, thanks.
We didn't have Alan here because he says insightful, really intelligent, well-worded statements. That seems like a great reason to have someone.
We also like him.
Well, yes, I mean, there can be many.
I was saying that in
reasons.
terms of Diana, not Alan. I was being mean to Diana.
Ouch! Shots fired. We
right.
should go to that loving chapter quickly. Jeez, Jackie.
It's okay. She took a great picture of me today at the hot dog stand.
Oh, that's good.
I'll show you.
Oh, we get to see it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't actually see this picture.
No, it's not germane to the conversation.
Nope, I guess it's not.
Oh, I also took this one of Rob.
Oh, I look great. Yikes. I think I look real good there.
Where's the
camera's over there.
Oh, Jesus.
Sorry, folks.
There's Rob.
Unrelated.
Wow. Doing his talk.
Doing my talk.
That's a great LinkedIn profile picture.
It is. It's like a power pose.
Oh, I took a lot of pictures today.
That's good. Oh, it's just pictures of Jackie's face.
Here's us.
So you got to get on Insta, become part of social media, post those things.
We are on Insta.
You can put it. I mean, we have, connections. It's all about connections.
Here's the last one, Jackie, just looking very bored.
That's going on the website, I think.
Yes.
Okay. Story time's over.
All right. I know another section in the book that, well, actually a couple sections in this part on learning that I thought were very fascinating was just the concept of the behavioral cusp. The fact that would come up because, I think cusp is one of those terms that, because we did a whole episode on cusps that I felt like I always was like, I kind of know what that is. If I don't think about it too much, it makes perfect sense. And then the more you get into the research, like, this is so complicated. I don't do I really know what this is, or am able to precisely describe this? And then to see it as a huge component of this parenting book, I was surprised because it seems like one of those concepts that, like, I probably wouldn't have called it a cusp. I would have called it something else, but nope, it's going to be described as a cusp. It is very well defined in the book. It is laid out for parents in terms of, examples of cuspal behavior, and it's there. And, I would assume that a parent would feel more appreciative that they're not being talked down to. I appreciate that outside of my parenting duties. So I don't know why I'm making that sound like a surprise, but the fact that it was in the book, I think it was helpful. And I think a lot of the metaphors and kind of the anecdotes that surrounded it made it much easier to understand. So again, going back to food, the discussion of how do you deal with the selective eater? How do you work with a selective eater or help a selective eater, and moving away from, well, of course you do, the utensil extinction and keep representing the food, and really thinking about it as, well, what are the pieces of the meal that are important to you as a family? It's not just, I wish Susie would eat all the foods that I stick in front of her and she's got to eat it, but more about that community time and that loving time and that time to be together. And, sort of thinking about, the cusp of being at the table. Food will then be, and consumption of food will then be one of the responses that is seen, but that doesn't need to be the be all end all goal of mealtime, is forcing your child to eat some amount of chicken nuggets or, whatever it is. Were there any other concepts that you felt like, I can't believe this isn't a parenting book, or like, this seems a little too complicated? Or do they all feel very much like right in line?
No, I mean, I think that cusp made sense. A behavioral cusp made sense to me, and that I think that's a common theme that we still even see in parent advocacy and education, is a sense of, my child has some differences that I'm not familiar with how to interact with them and enjoy being a parent. And it's a big part of parent training. It's just the signals of what is growth and success are just different, and parents have to learn that. And so this approach of thinking about some of these behaviors as cusps gets them to reinforcers that parents want and seek, and can be hard to find, which, I think that they don't say that outright, but the way that they framed the conversation, especially one of them being being the parent of an autistic child, just sort of laid out there. So
I like the sustainability part of this, right? Because it's like, you don't want to it's not like a piecemeal. You want to start, and you want like I said before about the collaboration, and you want the things that you're working on to be sustainable outside of the therapy. And that's something important. And I think that's something that behavior analysts always have in mind, but may not say it, right? So parents may not recognize it, or they might not tell the parent, like, the end goal, like in a year, here's where I'm building up to, right? And making sure that communication is there, and actually having that, like, thinking about, where do I want the child to be in 6 months, in 1 year, in 5 years, and what are the things that I'm working on right now going to get us there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. The idea of sustainability is one that I think is very challenging for a lot of behavior analysts who are sort of stuck in that commoditization of the services. Insurance is paying for this, you will do this many hours, and then when the problem is solved, like, the child is a problem, but when their problem is solved, then you will move on to something different. And it is so funny how that wasn't a goal of our, early behavior analysts. And they bring that up kind of at the beginning of this section of just how everything felt more, there was like this experimentation to so much more of it. So on the one hand, that was kind of, an unfortunate part of just those early days of treatment for, certain, problem behaviors back in the 50s and 60s, but how there was much more of a view of the child as a whole in many ways. And then as the science became more precise, there wasn't necessarily the same amount of effort put towards sustainability. And I know, someone who consults in schools, I try very hard to think about that. But even reading this section, I realized like, I think about it as hard as I need to. I really need to be thinking about whole child and the community the child is in. And I need to make a change that's going to change that community, as well as here's the token board that I put in place. There's got to be more to it than just I did this one thing related to this one area of a child's life, and I'll leave and I'll be like, that's probably good enough, because it may not be if I'm not paying attention to context. It may be, but I have to be paying attention to that context, to that community, to what will this change mean over a span of time, not just in the moment, not just in this one area.
Well, and I just think that the sustainability for that reason is an important part of how we think about is a parent's desire for a certain outcome. Is it just an individual set of parents wanting this, or is there this huge community cultural component? It's probably both. And our intervention, again, to be sustainable, needs to address all of that context. Mm-hmm. So it's just sort of, in that sense, I think that's why they lay it out as a difficult but obvious part, is that like we shouldn't think of this is what parents want. Oh, this is an important part of their community. It's like, no, like that's all one big human blob that we've got to just never forget. It's not one or the other. You can't just have, this is also a practice that addresses their like differences in the mainstream culture and a minority culture. It's like, no. We should start from that mindset from the very beginning, right? That we want this intervention to work for this person in their family, in their community. Now let's look at what we're going to do. Mm-hmm.
Do you want to be a BCBA?
Sure, we all do.
Now you can come to Regis College in Weston, Mass. to get your graduate degree.
Choose from any one of these courses.
Masters of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis.
Masters of Science in Special Education.
Dual degree in Special Ed and ABA.
Or be eligible for your postmaster's certificate.
You can complete your degree and be ready to sit for the exam in 2 years. And our 2017 grads had a 100% pass rate on the BACB exam.
Come enjoy practicum placement support, ethics mini handbooks, PhD-level professors, small class sizes, and a service trip to Iceland.
If interested, don't delay. Supplies are limited. Learn more at regiscollege.edu.
Again, that's www.regiscollege.edu, regiscollege.edu. One more time, www.regiscollege.edu.
See you there!
Hey everybody, sorry to pause the conversation mid-stream, but I wanted to remind all of our listeners that ABA Inside Track is ACE and QABA approved, and just like our regular episodes for listening to our special book clubs, you're able to earn 2 CEs. Well, that's not like our regular episodes because this is double length, so 2 CEs. And remember, if you are getting this on your special patron feed, those CEs are at no additional charge. You'll just need to go to the original post to put in the special third code I put there. It's a discount code to get 2 CEs for free. If you're getting this about a year or so in the future on your free feed, then just go purchase them from the website like you normally do with a link in the show notes. But you're going to need 2 code words. And the first code word is aloe, A-L-O-E. It's like that plant that makes that great salve you can put on your sunburn. You know, it's like a green stuff. It feels good, right? Maybe you can eat it too. I don't know. Anyway, aloe. All right. And now back to our book club on Between Now and Dreams. All right. I think I want to make sure we give all the sections their time. So let's move into a clinician question from the author's website on the power of learning. The authors describes, again, this is from the Between Now and Dreams website. I'm going to pick one of the questions. There's a lot of questions. The authors describe ABA as a science of love and change, which this book might be the first one where I've heard of my science as one of love. But the change, yes. The love, not always. Why did they choose those words? And do you think this is the case? Why or why not?
I would just say that that's the whole thing about like the nurture effect, like this idea that we're nurturing skills. They've just taken a much more culturally loaded term, love, and saying that if we want to be nurturing, we should be loving. Like they're just making a powerful statement. But I mean, if we are the science of nurturing, we should be the science of love. It's not an unfair extension. They just come out very boldly and say it. Or at least that was my reaction to that statement.
Mm-hmm. Donna, what do you think?
I'm not going to get the quote right, but Skinner does have a quote about love being the most powerful reinforcer and vice versa. So I don't think we're too far off track in thinking about how we might include love. I also think it's highly relevant to discussions that we have regarding social validity in our field, and that we cannot do ABA as it needs to be done if we're coming from our own perspective. It has to be what is important, meaningful, best, and beneficial for the client. And that involves us taking their perspective, working hard to understand where a family and a client is coming from, and doing what they want over what we might want. And that is part of the definition of love.
Mm.
What is love except another name for the use of positive reinforcement, or vice versa?
Thank you.
Too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Jackie, what do you think about ABA as a science of love and change?
I love it.
Do you think there's I mean, you agree?
I 100% agree. And I think that we should be promoting that more, right? Because that is what we do. We should be culturally responsive. We should be loving our clients, loving our staff, loving our jobs, loving that we're making changes in the world. Because if love is at the forefront, we're less likely to do harm. Right? So, 100%. I'm into it.
All right. Sounds good. And I was just going to do like one section.
Can I say one other thing?
Oh, of course you can, Dana.
Oh no! And now I have another reference that I don't have the reference for. It's in a Hanley article, but he talks about what the golden rule is, and the golden rule is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which you find across all religions as well. But he goes beyond that to say, let's not think about the golden rule, right? What would I want to have done to me, and I'll do that to someone else. But let's do the platinum rule, which is do unto others what they would want to have done to themselves. So you're taking yourself out of the equation, which is also relevant here.
And as we all know from Dungeons and Dragons, platinum better than gold.
Yeah.
Maybe from real life too. I don't actually know the price of fancy metals right now.
Yeah.
Gold's usually pretty expensive though.
It is more.
Okay, it is?
Yeah.
Gold is more than platinum?
No, platinum.
Oh, platinum is still more? Okay.
Yeah.
I've learned something new today.
It's 100 ducats.
There's so many ducats, buckets of ducats. I was going to just do one guided kind of question from the Between Now and Dreams website per section, but there was another one I kind of like, so I'm going to squeeze it in real quick. Give examples of some of the potentially hazardous and halcyon attitudes that you see either in yourself or that you've seen in families and colleagues. Let's just say colleagues. Let's just leave it in our own circle of clinicians. Potentially hazardous and halcyon attitudes. Halcyon being thinking too positively of the past.
I think sometimes you hear everyone worried about whether a child's going to be bullied, let's say, for behavior that they're engaging in. And so the reason that you would be trying to decrease that behavior is out of fear of stigmatization for that child. And I think they make the point in, I don't know where in the book. The book does kind of have a free flowing aspect to it to make it where if I wanted to find a particular point again, it would be challenging. But they make the point somewhere in there that we shouldn't be addressing behavior just because it makes somebody else uncomfortable, right? We need to be addressing behavior that's problematic for that person. So rather than saying, oh, this is a stigmatizing behavior that needs to be reduced or changed, maybe instead we need to be educating everyone about why this behavior might be occurring and why it's not actually a big deal. So that's an example, I guess, of a hazardous attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we touched on it to some extent in the episode about like conversion therapy, and that it's not just enough to be like, well, that was of its time, but we're not like that anymore. It's like, no, we need to say that it was a problem then, it's a problem now. Let's do better, and let's make positive contributions. Let's make sure our field isn't just not doing bad, but we actually need to be doing good and making positive contributions to the lives of people and to the research at the same time.
All right.
I don't have anything more to add there. That was
okay.
Good.
All right, let's move on to part 2, the power of connecting. I think this chapter, more than others, I know for me, I kind of got lost in it, or I kind of lost it in terms of, like I remember, like the power of learning, we already talked about sort of like that was the most sort of clinical part of this book. And then the power of love, I sort of got that as a concept and as sort of not the culmination of the whole book, because it's one of 3 parts, but sort of, in terms of wrapping up the book, it was the last part of the book. So it sort of also had to do the job of wrapping up the overall kind of narrative included in the book. So the power of connecting kind of felt like, well, this is repeating some of the information that I've already learned about working with clinicians or working with others. But I think it was today when I was kind of, reading my notes for the second time that I understood how much this section, even though it did cover some of the information that you'd find in the last and first part of the book, really did need to stand on its own in terms of the creation of communities. That it wasn't, when it did talk about sort of making communities and working with, say, a clinician, like a behavior analyst, it wasn't talking about it the same way it did at the beginning of the book, when it was sort of more talking about the idea of looking for individuals who care about the context that you and your child are in. But it really had to do with the idea of you as a parent learning, understanding what understanding how to get more information, how to understand what it's like to find your community of practice, how to find people who will help you feel more empowered, not just tell you what you don't know, but sort of fill in pieces of what you need to know. So I think this section, more than the others, was one that I don't think I was paying as much attention to when I read this the first time. And it definitely came to mean a lot more and really helped me think about the idea of building those connections much more personally than some of the other sections. So building my connections as a parent myself, not just as a clinician reading a book about parenting and sort of, thinking about what do I want to know more about my good relationships with the families I work with.
I thought this section was vital to the book, right? Because personally around like being your child's advocate, and you are on the same team, not below, not above, right? But you're on the same team as your the BCBA that you're working with, or any other professionals, right? And how you interact as a family is going to specifically result in how you interact with your child, right? So if the family itself is not doing well, your child is not going to be doing well, right? So I thought that was awesome that they were like, okay, we got to connect. First, you have to connect with the providers. You need to see yourself as an equal. You need to, view them as a team. Then once you feel good there, remember, you have to look at the family. That's also important. It's important for you to be talking in your family, talking with your, your life. And then if things aren't going well, you can leave. I loved that, right?
Mhm.
Like you can't leave your family usually. But if things aren't going well, like with a provider, you don't have to stay with them.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
you owe them nothing. If it's not going well, find somewhere out, like get out. And here are the signs that, it'll look like to get out. And I like that because I have talked to a lot of parents that have been like very scared to leave agencies because they've been there so long. They're like, well, we first got our diagnosis. They've done so much for us in the last years. Like we would feel bad. We love our our behavior tech. But they're not happy, right? And if they're not happy, then they should leave. And it's okay, right? So I love that they've put that in there because I think for many parents, just hearing that it's okay to leave will allow them to leave.
Yeah. But also more than just leave, that they can respectfully disagree that this is just not for us. It's not, I think, what we're looking for right now. Right. It's not important. Or like there's the disconnect, whatever it might be, but you can do it respectfully and just, this is how it's going to be, hopefully no harm, no foul in terms of ending the relationship. Because again, at some point later in your life, you might decide, you know what, that wasn't what my child needed 5 years ago, but 5 years later, maybe they are offering something that we could use. Or maybe it's what that child needed when they were 3. They don't need it now that they're 10 or 11.
Yeah. I just love that. I love that part.
Yes.
I felt like this section was sort of set up to say, all right, I'm talking to you parents, but professionals listen, right? Because I'm telling parents this. So when they come to you, this will be what the attitude that they have, and you need to be respectful of it. And then conversely, all right, parents, I'm talking to clinicians here and telling them what to do. So be prepared because they will have opinions and be seeking responsibility but also clinicians, you should be aware of that and keep yourself accountable and wholesome. And you're part of a team. You're not the expert. You're just contributing. So it's a really nice way of talking to two communities and kind of going back and forth and sort of like facilitating a dialogue. You have, which I think was good and helpful. And again, about like, these are how the community works and a lot of like back and forth. So I thought they did a good job with that.
Yeah.
It's pretty heavy lifting for a book that's pages are only like 6 inches tall.
Yeah.
It's a cute, but we did not talk about this in the introduction. It is an adorable sized book.
Yeah, it really is. It's like a little bit bigger than pocket size.
Yeah.
And the pages are nice feeling.
Yeah.
I want that to be my back of the book quote if they do another printing, like adorable size, nice page feel. Robert Perry Chris, Jackie McDonald. Maybe it's that check.
Pretty colors. Well, one thing I also like is in the beginning of each of these sections, we haven't said this, I don't believe, is they all start with a quote, not by the authors, but a quote that they brought from outside. And I wonder if the quotes came first or if the writing came first. Because
quotes came first.
You think they found quotes that were meaningful and then they expanded? It might be some of both.
I think it was
quotes.
In talking with them and sort of like the process as they went through of writing it, my guess is sometimes it was a quote first, but a lot of times it was just them talking about their impressions, their thoughts on a matter, and then either having the quote ready to go related to that or thinking about a good quote that captured the point of it. I did not ask them. I should have. That's a good question. I should have asked them that specifically, but I did not get the sense from hearing about writing that it was they had a lot of thoughts already. So the quotes may have been a part of the discussion, but I think they came a little later in the process. But again,
it is clear from from the writing here that these authors have been thinking about this for a long time. So it may be that they encountered the quote at some point and then found that it was helpful. But I picked one that I wanted to share on chapter 2, which was, quote, "Your intuition and parental instincts are good and reliable. You will lose nothing by changing your mind about priorities. You have no obligation to live with guilt. You know your child best. Your child needs you just because you are you." And that was by Randall Colton Ralph.
I think I cried after that one, to be honest. That was one of the ones
really
that I got teary-eyed. I was like, that's true.
Yeah. So, and those are peppered throughout. There's so many great quotes in here. I love quotes. So I love that aspect of this book.
That's good.
I will just say I love the James Baldwin quote about love does not begin or end the way we seem to think it does. Love is a battle. Love is a war. Love is a growing up.
Oh,
That's the
look at
next
that. It's dog-eared. Look at that.
Yeah.
You too.
Well, because I think that's
fantastic quote.
Yeah, it's a fantastic quote. And it's an important sort of what we've been saying, that like being a parent isn't all roses and sunshine, but it also doesn't have to just be a gray cloud of stuff that you have to endure and survive. They're both, and you succeed on one hill and there's a new valley of like splendor and joy beyond. So
I wanted to talk a little bit about the there's a section they talk about some work that one of Dr. Eli Rosales' I believe grad students had done, Barahona, I believe, or Heather Barahona, and some work that she'd done with parents in terms of teaching them to be better advocates, or I don't say better advocates, but to advocacy behaviors for those kind of charged situations like IEP planning meetings with your school. Because as much as this was a positive chapter about building connections, many of these connections get fraught at various times because you're dealing with large bodies, some of which are very immovable in terms of this is how things are going to be. That can be very frustrating to families. They can be frustrating to professionals too, but they definitely can be frustrating to families who count on many of those services. And she had this the section on advocacy, which I believe, I looked it up. I was able to find some of it online myself because I was very fascinated. I'm like, I'd love to learn more about that. But then actually, when I asked Shala about that research, the first thing that came up was, isn't it frustrating that we need to find a training to teach parents to feel like they're strong advocates for their children? Wouldn't it be nice if they didn't have to learn new skills just to advocate for services they felt their child needed? Which on the one hand, I was like, well, that doesn't really answer my question because they do need these skills. But then the other hand, I was like, that is the better question. It's like, why does this even have to be this way? Which I think this book does acknowledge that sort of, well, I mean, that's the title, right? Between Now and Dreams. There's one. It would be nice if those types of meetings and talking about services and the apportioning of services was not something parents needed to feel like they had to fight for, because it does impact a lot of connections that can be made. And it can be hard as a clinician. And I think for me, personally, if we talk about hazardous attitudes, that whole section also describes the idea of having your IEP bookmark, which again, you can get a template to make one of those at the Between Now and Dreams website, Peggy told me. So if you want to make a bookmark that lays out what's important to your child, to you, have a picture of your child to sort of help the team remember, like, we're working to support this child. That to me used to be such a red flag of like, this parent's going to be mad at me. And, reading this book, I had to reflect on, why was that something that made me upset in a meeting? Like the parent, this parent's going to care about their kid in front of me. I can't believe it. It's going to make it so hard for me to propose my behavior analytic objectives. And I really was taken aback at how, wow, I can't believe that was ever my attitude, that I never was thinking about, I need to make a connection with this parent, with this child, and not just to get what I want or to make them think they like me so they'll do what I say, but because that has to be a part of the service I am providing, because I am an expert in many things. I am not an expert in this child in every aspect of their life. That's not my role here. And I can't take that as the role. So I definitely found that section to be one that I could guess some people read that and were like, that's a great idea. For me, it was very illuminating to old behaviors and old patterns that I know I used to have. And sometimes we'll even think about, I'll come back to them and I have to take that step back. Like they recommend, when you're having a bad relationship or you're having a problem, taking that step back and asking that question of like, why is this upsetting me? Should this be upsetting me? The answer is no. But the why was very reflective and helped me, very much reflect on, am I always really trying to make that connection? Am I always making a welcoming place for parents to want to make that connection? What does that mean for my relationship? What does that mean for individual family and child? But what does that mean as a field? If other people are thinking this way, that's going to hurt our field as a whole too. So I really appreciated that chance to get to reflect from that section.
I know, and I have done that as well sometime too. I don't know if I was pervasive in it, but I can remember a few times where I'm like, that parent was wrong. And I'm like, they're probably not wrong. I probably could have looked at it in a different way, right? And come about it with a different angle, and maybe we could have compromised more, or, had a different solution.
Well, I think that's a part of our field that we don't get trained for.
Yeah.
That the idea that part of our job, especially in places where services are more limited or there are fewer options, that we are, it's not a perfect analogy, but we are to some extent a lightning rod. Like, we are the person that strong emotion can be directed at, and it's our job to like accept it and help channel it, not just get rid of it, but to help be in a conversation and work in concert with the parent to say, all right, you're frustrated about this. Let's find a solution. But parents don't have to be like civil all the time. It's easier on us, but parents can't. It's their child. They get to have strong emotions. And if we aren't doing something right, or we have done something wrong, we have to take accountability for that part of it as well. That we have caused some strong feelings. Just like we want to be accountable for the joy and happiness, like, oh, that was so great that this family feels so much better. It's also like, I messed up there, and I really need to work with this family to correct that.
And, by the time parents get to a point where they're at an IEP meeting, you also have to think like they've been through years of this process of attempting to advocate for their child, and everyone's behavior is shaped by their past experiences. So if you're meeting a parent who's coming on very, very strongly, chances are they've had to have that behavior shaped up in order to be met with reinforcement, which is actually getting the services that their child needs. So you may be inheriting behavior that's worked in the past, even if you weren't the direct source of the reason why it looks like it is now. But there may be antecedent behaviors that we can engage in to demonstrate how much we care about this child as a whole, how we care about the family as a whole. And, the way that I used to approach IEP meetings changed so much from when I started to when I ended, because I really changed that approach. And I would start things off by saying like, yeah, we're here to, write this IEP for Johnny, but that's only part of what we're doing here today, right? We're here to celebrate who he is and how much we, care about him and how much he's grown in all of these different ways. And while we're going to review some tough things in this meeting, because that's kind of what we have to do, we also recognize that there's so many different ways that that he's grown and that he can show us, and that, we know that you as a family love him and support him, and et cetera. And, or you could bring like art examples that kids have done, right, to those types of meetings and say, look at this awesome thing that he's done, and kind of like set the tone in that way. I think the bookmark is a great idea. And we described it, right? It had a picture of the child at the top, and then different questions on there, or statements on there.
Things you wanted to, remember. You wanted to make a part
I loved that
sure it was a
idea.
part of the meeting.
Yeah.
And you can get a template on the betweennowandreams.com to do a template. I mean, I'm sure you could make one on your own too, but there's one available.
Yeah, and I think of the IEP meeting as an interesting moment in time, and then we often think of it as the place where conversations happen, but we don't treat on the clinical side. We're often putting in a lot of work before that treatment plan review to review what parents want and what their goals are, and have had these conversations. I was fortunate as a teacher to have that, to always be talking to parents, especially in the months before we had an IEP meeting scheduled. So great, we got a meeting on the books. Please tell me what your concerns are now, so that we can have a productive meeting where everything that you want is addressed from the start. Because sitting down and having 3-hour IEP meetings, it's not just, it's so frustrating to have it be that long. It's like, no, parents don't always have 3 hours either. But if that's how they have to be heard, that's not good.
Mm-hmm. I love that point, Alan. And I love how you phrased it as sort of like a positive. that
Yeah.
you could do that time. You had that time before the meeting. And I do think that is a way that, for I think teachers and possibly some folks in the special ed departments of our schools, they don't necessarily get that training on how do you build that rapport. Some of it's due to numbers, some of it's due to just not knowing. And that sense of like, well, it's the IP meeting. We got this much time. We have to solve everything. And then we're all like, oh, why was that meeting so bad? Or, oh, why are we all at such a crummy time? Why did everyone get so frustrated and frazzled? Why was it so long? And it was like, well, so much of that work does have to happen ahead of time. Like if you have that connection with the family, then before you sit down to the meeting what their concerns are, what their issues are, where they see things going in the next few years. And if you already know that, then when you have an IEP meeting, it can't be an hour because, all right, we all know what we're here for. We all know what we're doing. Let's just kind of hash out some of the details of that because we've already had some of these conversations and we're all on the same page about how excited we are at growth and where we think we can provide even more skill acquisition to accelerate that growth. Great, hooray. And you can just focus on the how, not just the why, or will we have to disagree? Because then that meeting is going to be forever. And most of it is going to be people being frustrated at other people, which isn't a great way to plan things. I have found myself as well. So there's so much to be said for making these connections and having them early in the relationship and making them ones that can be beneficial for everyone involved in them. Before we go, because I don't want to miss talking about love. I did want to quickly mention the section in here on building strength and resilience and the anecdote of bumper bowling as kind of a metaphor of, for parents, the idea of you can scout communities for your children, you can train them to do all sorts of things, but anytime you can give them those opportunities to learn on their own, you want to grab them. And so for those who don't know, bumper bowling is when if you go to a bowling alley where you roll the ball, you hit the pins, they'll just put these domes over the alleys or the gutters, right? So that the ball, no matter what, will bounce off the sides and will hit some of the pins. Probably won't get a strike. Maybe you could, but you'll probably hit a couple of the pins. And how in this anecdote, Sam and other kids could just actually get a chance to throw the ball. And as they got used to throwing the ball and as they hit the pins, they found the activity enjoyable, which meant they thought about it more and they worked at it so that eventually they didn't need those gutters anymore. And it allowed the parents to not have to stand behind them and sort of manually guide the perfect spin on the ball or any of that stuff so that they got a strike and they didn't get disheartened and frustrated and quit. And really thinking about where are the areas you can arrange stimulus control. And then this next part's a quote: to prompt, constrain, or deflect ways of responding that encourage our children to develop their own strength in particular situations, then continue altering those supports until our child achieves the desired independence. And I thought that was just a great kind of addition to this section in terms of getting parents, and this comes up a lot in the last section, so maybe it's a good segue, to understand that being connected to your child isn't the same as being attached at the hip at your child. But also, I think that's important for clinicians too, that idea of teaching independence doesn't always mean you need to be there at step 0 with the full manual guidance. There are other things you can do to promote resilience and independence that are probably more fun for everybody involved.
Well, I just think about one of the very first trainings or conferences I went to as a teacher and learning behavior analyst was Peter Gerhardt talking about how, we think about the course of person growing up to be an independent adult and say by age 14, they need to be able to do their own laundry. That doesn't mean that, we wait until age 14 to start teaching the skills of laundry. No, we shape lifelong behaviors for as early as possible. We want exposure. We want to shape. We want to model these things. We want, that's a process, and that you can't just, treat everything like a discrete skill that's going to be taught when it's developmentally appropriate, quote unquote. It's, to find a way to have children exposed to life as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And what I like about this section is that includes some just being part of the family and being a loving person. A child might struggle to do that in a way that communicates effectively to all caregivers, but we still want to expose them to that. And then that gets you into all sorts of great conversations about like patience and lots of terms that we associate with being loving that are essential both for caregivers and for clinicians.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. All right, here is a question from their clinicians' question guides. The authors describe reciprocity as something that, quote, breathes life and depth, end quote, into our relationships. What are some examples of this in your own life, in the lives of the children and families you serve? In this section, they describe the idea of reciprocal connections with the idea of reciprocity and your mutual reinforcement either being something that's transactional, where something happens, we both appreciate it, relational, whereas things happen over time that only are valued when you are with someone specifically, and then coordinated. So the idea that your happiness is coming from the happiness of the other person. Kind of all of these are sort of examples of some reciprocal interactions that will foster connections. But I don't know, what is that kind of quote, or what do you think in terms of when you're thinking of reciprocal interactions? It can be personal or it can be professional, because the question let you do either one.
I think fitting in with your earlier note about potentially hazardous
patterns or
yeah.
And halcyon attitude.
I anecdotally feel that I hear a lot of families or have read reports that families can experience this type of reciprocity with their child's scripting or echolalia type of behavior. And because they know their child so well, they'll know like, oh, they're referencing this movie and this is the thing that happens in that movie. And that actually does relate to the situation right now. And I can respond with something else from the movie and it will have these additional layers of meaning that actually does mean something significant between those two parties, even though maybe outside of that little bubble, it doesn't look functional. And to bring back in the other point, if you are too quick as a clinician to try to squelch all of that type of scripting behavior, you may, stunt those burgeoning reciprocal interactions between family members.
That's a very good point, Diana.
100%. Like that is a conversation I and my clinical director have all the time. That we don't treat. It's important to not treat scripts as just quote unquote automatic behavior that's interfering. It's like, no, like it's language.
Yeah.
And it can have a lot of function in the moment. And taking that perspective, and that's what's great about working with like SLPs who also have that attitude. It's just like, oh, this child is communicating quite a lot with this little phrase.
Yeah.
So no, I love that as an example because that's a conversation I have frequently that isn't the norm in our field currently, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah. So
I think of when, you're the friend and you start quoting, I guess the old reference would be Monty Python and the Holy Grail, but there's got to be a more recent movie that like two people would be like, I start the phrase and then you end the phrase. And if you were an outside observer, you'd be like, you're engaging in stereotypic behavior, you're engaging in scripting. But well, I'm only engaging in it because my friend is here and we like to say these lines out loud and to each other.
I mean, isn't that what millennium meme culture was all about? Like the fact like that we just have these memes and they have so much context and we engage in them. And it's just because we had a rather unique set of circumstances about how we communicated on the early internet. Like that's...
I guess, Alan, I wouldn't know. I'm a little too old for meme culture. So thank you for answering my questions and making me feel old.
But you're not too old to learn about how other generations developed, Rob.
No, I'm going to be rigid. I don't want to do memes. I'm not doing them.
My dad sent me a meme.
Your dad's more flexible than I am. Now I feel really bad.
Because you know the meme about the lady that's like pointing and yelling and then the other side is the cat?
Yeah.
Yeah. He sent me just the first half of it and he goes, I didn't include the cat. So he knew like rest of the meme.
Yeah.
That's so hip.
Yeah. I know.
Just to go back about reciprocity, because I did think about this. I think one place that we as a field, we've started talking about it, but not as much, is we have because we are a private healthcare sector, we tend to have a very transactional approach to the field in terms of burnout. And it's like, well, if we just paid people enough, it wouldn't be a problem. It's like, no, I think some people would burn out no matter how much they're getting paid because they aren't getting other types of connectedness in the situation.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I always try to help my staff and parents and anyone involved. And I know for myself, find out, well, what is a success? What is connection with this individual child? And saying that, like, no, like their behavior changes around you in a very positive way. You just don't see it because it's not something you're accustomed to seeing. And that can be a child, like you in a room, the child's running around and they suddenly start bumping into you, but they don't have to. Like you're just now a part of what their attention span is, and they're engaging you in a way that they know how. Mm-hmm. So, or every time you walk into a room, someone yells a quote at you that you go back and forth with. That's, that can be anything. And that goes more into those other types of relational types of connection. So I think that's an important part that, again, we're starting to talk about more with like our AIM oriented, our ACT oriented trainings, but we have a long way to go.
Yeah. And I like that they defined the reciprocity really broadly in these chapters. So it's not just about eye contact.
Yeah.
Right. There's so many ways that you can connect with another individual, and that was highlighted throughout.
Mm-hmm. I think eye contact only came up as an example of how you could use your procedures wrong and how you're not building enough of a reinforcing environment to encourage eye contact rather than just doing this sort of like, I'm going to grab your head and jam it towards my eyes.
Right. I would not recommend doing that. I mean, they reference
no, they don't bring that up as procedure.
some components of shaping response.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Carol Gray has a great anecdote about that. And when she speaks about how it's like the 70s, she's in a classroom trying to figure all this stuff out. And anytime one of her students would make eye contact, she had a squirt bottle of apple juice to try to reinforce eye contact, and how that was a horrible, stupid, dehumanizing approach. And that her student called her out on later on in life. It was just like, did you think I was a plant? Why did you spray me all the time?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's horrible. But I just think...
Oh, I never heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, that happened. That is what eye contact intervention was. And I think still a lot of people consider that what it is. It's like, no, eye contact should be a way of saying, hey, I see you. I address you. Let's have an interaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So...
But there are lots of other ways of acknowledging another person. If eye contact is
of
not
course.
your thing.
Yeah, of course.
All right, the last part 3, the power of loving, which just makes me want to sing a Huey Lewis in the News song. Which if we'd done that to each other, Alan and Jackie were like, why are they scripting? But it would have been showing our reciprocity.
Yeah, we script a lot.
We do script a lot.
Yeah.
I've seen Back to the Future as well a lot. I understand the power of love as a reference.
I think Jackie might even know that one.
No, Jackie's never seen that movie.
It's in our talk.
I know the
She and I
song.
do a talk.
Okay.
It's in there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So Jackie knows
I know-
from a very specific context.
I know the song.
Okay. So what did we think of part 3, the power of loving?
Good ending.
Which I liked. I didn't, but again, my character on the show is one that does not believe in such things as emotion, what you humans call love.
I think it's a good way to end because that's what we're changing as a framework for a parent is that, remember, loving comes first, but that's going to be the hardest thing, like the learning to love section, right?
Mm-hmm.
Learning, you have to think about what those interactions are going to look like, and they might be different than what you expected, and that's okay. And it might be, right, you are going to have to demonstrate love in different ways and maybe for longer than you imagine, right? They said that too, that, that you may, adolescence is going to be different. You may need to be looking out for more harmful things. Your child might run away. You might be like, your learning to love is going to be a little different for you, and that is okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has challenges, and your challenges might be a little different, but you can still embrace them and love your child and learn the ways that your child is communicating with you And not just say, oh, they don't care about me, right?
Mm.
Know that they care about you and looking for those ways that they're showing you.
Mm.
Yeah, I like that. And then, your child wants your attention, even though you don't think that they do. They do. And you just have to find where that is.
Mm-hmm.
I like those 2 chapters. The sunshine of our attention and learning to love. Those 2 sections kind of, I think, went hand in hand.
I really like in the last portion or section of this where they talk about how every child is born with differences from other children. But there comes a point where if enough of those differences manifest or visible, then that comes with a label. But they do that within the context of like home. Like we still, as human beings, want a safe, loving, caring space to exist within. And how something like a label can disrupt the home and the family. But it's really not the label, it's the differences, and that we've built a context in which those differences aren't functional. They don't help that individual meet their progress. And so we've got to change what home is in a positive, meaningful way. I think that's a great just like takeaway for anybody, both parents and clinicians, of like, that's the context of what we're doing. And we should keep that front and center, that we are trying to make the environment, the home, the family, a good space for the 3 behaviors they list here: learning, loving, connecting.
I was surprised in the section on love's walking through love's dark side at the touching upon the idea that love, which we think of as sort of, it's a positive, it's always good, there's only good to be found in love. But that idea that the way we love, especially when we love our children, how that can lead us to other behaviors that are more negative, or that we'd perceive as negative. Or how, our love for our child can lead us to feel other emotions that we think of as sort of like the bad emotions, right? Like fear, we feel anxious, or we feel envy, and recognizing that it's okay to feel these, and that this is a part of loving your child and wanting what's best for them, and caring about your relationship, and that these aren't necessarily bad emotions, but just helping yourself learn to see them as a flag of these. I'm feeling this way because something is having an impact on me. And rather than just saying I shouldn't feel this way, or feeling bad that you feel this way, or thinking, well, the fact that I feel angry means I must not love my child. Like, nope, this is a part of it all. They all kind of are related. I just need to think about, what is this emotion telling me? The idea that anger, and the examples they give in the book are that you might be angry because you're feeling a threat to your child, or your child needs protection, and your love is leading you to anger, which may not be the most productive thing to do in the moment. Maybe it is. Maybe it is too, anxiety. I'm not sure what's supposed to be happening right now. I want this for my child, but I don't know what to do to get there. Or envy. I love my child. I want them to have what those people over there have, and they can't. And I'm so, that's also making me feel envious, which makes me feel angry and anxious at the same time. And that, again, none of these are bad feelings. And as a parent, you should not feel guilty for feeling this way, but that it is okay to accept it, to acknowledge it, and to think, why might this be happening in this moment? Because that's going to lead you to better respond to reaching your value or your goal in the situation, and then using that information to better plan for ways to support and love your child. Which I don't think comes up, but I think, that's definitely a Western thing. The idea of how many of these feelings we talk about a lot on the show, we talk about a lot as a group, but that idea of all these feelings, of the bad feelings that you should not have. And I appreciated that this book, while it didn't go too deep into sort of, ACT, understandings, it did bring them up a lot. Like, if you know what ACT is going into this book, you clearly can see it throughout many of the sections of the book, even though I think it's only mentioned a few times and not in great depth in terms of ACT as a thing, so much as some of those concepts being potentially important for families or of value to families.
Great. We love our children fiercely, and whenever you feel passionately in one direction, you can equally feel passionately in another direction, because there's heightened emotion there. So all of those things you described are examples of heightened emotion, and you experience those because you love your child so much. You care about every in and out of the relationship. Something else I was going to say.
In this section, I like, I think it's in Learning to Love. They talk about disgust, and I really like this section because it's a big part of, sometimes it's hard to have a conversation of like, is this behavior like just cause discomfort and disgust on the parents, but is it really dangerous? Is there anything that I can change in the moment? And having to talk to parents about like I can't stop a behavior necessarily because I have to understand what's going on, or if we start an intervention, it won't go away immediately. We have to find a replacement behavior. And sometimes it's just, there's more going on than we can see. And if we can rule out a medical component, if we can rule out harm, then there's this other component of like, can we find a way to live with this until we can get to the point where it's not a problem anymore? Yeah. So, and I think it was really nice to see it kind of like discussed, because I think we don't talk about that nearly enough.
I thought they did a really good job in this section of tackling some of these issues that aren't brought up very much. And I think they did so because they wanted to ensure that parents of children who do have high support needs are represented here, and we get to hear from their perspective what their lives are like, how challenging some of these aspects are for them at home, and that they need to have a voice in order to share what some of those experiences are. And we don't always hear as much from that population because the clients themselves can't tell us.
All right. Well, I think we're getting near the end. I'll do one more question from the authors about this section, and then we'll do my favorite section, which is, did the book have a good last ending line, which is very important to me personally, and possibly to nobody else. But no one's told me they don't like that section, so I always do it. And my question: the authors suggest we need inspiration in science. What does this mean, and do you agree?
For me, that would mean inspiration in science means what we're trying to uncover, like the principles, what we're trying to work with, the problems we're going to solve. That inspiration comes directly from the clients that we work with, I think, and trying to solve those problems. For basic researchers, right, their inspiration needs to come from the applied field, where we have gaps, where we have less understanding of why something's happening, because otherwise they're just finding out stuff. Oh gosh, I almost ruined my computer. They're finding out information for information's sake, which is great, right? But I think the inspiration that was going to move our field forward is if we're collaborating with the basic researchers and the applied researchers and those that are doing the things that are in between, right? And finding inspiration from solving the problems that are important in our society, right? That's what makes us applied behavior analysts, is that we are looking to better the lives of our clients in the world. So that's what I would say. Yes.
It's like Jurassic Park. You never stopped to ask if you could. You should have stopped to ask if you should.
I haven't seen Jurassic Park. I'm sorry.
You haven't seen the original Jurassic Park?
No, I've obviously seen snippets, but haven't seen it.
No media shaming, Rob. That's not productive.
Okay.
People have different backgrounds. But thinking about the science versus inspiration, it's if early on, I think we were a little more on the science side of finding an effective solution to problems. We weren't inspired to be mentally and emotionally engaged with what we were doing, that we really should think fully before we act on our scientific knowledge. that's sort of the takeaway I took, that inspiration is not just being hopeful, but just being involved from step one and thinking about what's best all around.
Mhm.
I think that I'm going to do like a Smashing Pumpkins thing here, right? But instead of emptiness to loneliness, I think inspiration takes you to motivation, and motivation takes you to reinforcement, and reinforcement takes you to joy. So I think this is just Shayla's way of getting us back to thinking about joy once again, which is a very important point for her. But because we are scientists, we also want to know whether the things that we're doing are meaningful, and they're meaningful in whether they actually make a difference. So that's where the science side comes in.
Mm-hmm. Well, that segues very nicely into the last kind of section or line of the book, because it is about inspiration and a little bit more. So this is on page 332. This is the end of the book. If you don't count the references, which there are tons and tons of great references.
Yeah,
so
nice
if you're a behavior
section.
analyst, you got lots of references. We love those. Humans need, this is the quote, humans need both science and inspiration, it turns out. In creating new spaces, both within and outside of home, we continue to connect our intellects, hearts, and souls. We understand our responsibility. We move forward. We keep learning and loving, for as we do, we build a path between now and the many possibilities for all our children. Which I think is a great last line of your book. I don't know if I would have given or taken away points if the last line had been between now and dreams, like they brought it back to the title. Is that too cheesy? I think maybe too cheesy. Many possibilities. I think it captures that same idea without
I
just
think it helps
repeating
to
the title.
interpret the title.
Yes.
As well.
Oh, so at the end you read the whole book and you're like, what's up with this between now? Oh my God, I get it now. So,
which, by the way, we've talked about between now and dreams as the title, but really it's responsible and responsive
Right.
parenting, between now and dreams.
Between now and dreams is the big letter. Now and dreams are bold.
Yeah, but we didn't say that in terms of looking for the book. If people want, like you.
Oh, yes.
The actual title is Responsible and Responsive Parenting. So, because it did take me just a little bit extra, like, is this the book I'm supposed to be reading? Okay, it is.
Great point.
All right. So the book wraps itself up nicely, and we all talked about many of the things that we liked about it. So I guess in the end, is this a book that you will be recommending to some of the families you work with or some of your colleagues, Diana and Jackie? Are you putting passages in the syllabus for your students to read? What
that would be against copyright law, so no.
Well,
we're
metaphorically,
doing it. We're right. Metaphorically, we are going to be if we're going to use the book, we're going to purchase it because we are not going to
have the students would need to purchase it.
Yep.
Damn it, you guys! This was a long con sting operation I was running for the Publishers of America. Ruined.
I've been caught by you before. I actually have already recommended this book to some of my students because I was reading it one day at work when I was covering a maternity leave. And they said, "What are you reading?" And I said, "This amazing book." And I explained to them what it was. And I said, "When you have time, but not right now, because I want you to finish your thesis. Please read this book. I think it'll be really helpful, as you come into the BCBA role, and it'll, I'm hoping it'll harness the things we've talked about in class, and it will bring everything together as a nice ending point for you in the second years, because they have gone through the program, and I don't have any access to first years at that moment. But yeah, and if a parent asks me for a book, if they need this sort of book, then yeah, I would recommend it.
Alan, Diana, have you recommended it yet, or you think you recommend it?
I haven't recommended it, but I think that I would.
Diana's been on vacation. I'm just jealous.
I think I would definitely recommend it, especially since we as a field are talking a lot about like trauma-informed approaches and whole person planning and things like that more. But to do it in a way, like this is a way to talk about this and be involved in this without just virtue signaling and using those terms in a very disingenuous way. Like if you want to actually sound and be genuine as a practitioner about these things, this is a great way to do that. the way that they talk about things is really great.
Thank you all so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed our discussion of Between Now and Dreams. We really enjoyed the book, and we hope that this inspires you either to pick it up and read it yourself and reflect, or if you've already picked it up, we hope you had some good talking points that you were able to think about or add to your own reflections. A couple housekeeping pieces. First of all, if you are getting this as it originally aired in 2023, that means you are a patron, and we thank you so very much for subscribing. Don't forget, in addition to putting in your 2 secret code words, there's a discount code on the patron page. So again, there'll be a link on that you can just go right to the Patreon page where there's going to be that third code that you can get a discount for 2 free CEs as a big thank you from us for subscribing and from supporting us. Again, if you're getting this in the future, well, you might want some free CEs, in which case you should go to patreon.com/ABA Inside Track and subscribe at the $10 and up level. If you're like, no, that's cool, I just want 2 CEs that I'm going to pay full price for without all those extra bonuses, that's cool too. Just enter in the second secret code word. Either way, actually, you have to enter in that second secret code word. It is Alice, ALICE. Diana got a cute little Alice statue from her Secret Santa, like Alice in Wonderland, you know? So that is now in her office at Regis College. And that's why I thought of this code word, Alice. Thanks to my book club buddies for joining us. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you pretty soon in the spring for our spring choice. Patrons, don't forget to check the website so that you can get notified when that poll goes up. But then we'll have our spring topic as well to look forward to. But until then, keep responding. Bye.